Hello, everyone, and welcome to this edition of Wine, Women, and Words. And joining us, as always, is Michelle.
Hello.
And our special guest this evening is Meg Cabot. She's here to talk with us about her latest novel, Enchanted to Meet You. So thank you so much for joining us.
Oh, thank you for having me. This is great.
Oh, we're so looking forward to picking your brain about all sorts of things. I know before we got started, you and I were talking about my writing, but now it's my turn to ask you about all of your writing.
Okay.
So after doing a little bit of light stalking, I mean, we only do a light stalking when we're
Oh,
researching our guests.
okay.
I promise it's nothing too intense. But from what I understand, you've written 50 novels in the course of
Maybe.
your career, somewhere around there.
Yeah, it's I've written a lot that never got published too. So I always like to bump that number up because I'm like, I still wrote them. They just nobody wants to buy them. So yeah, quite a few. There's a lot. It's kind of how I dealt with my, emotions was by writing. And I did actually keep a diary my whole life. So it just seems to be an outlet for me when things aren't going so great, or even when things are going great to write it down.
I
Mhm.
love that. And especially bringing up the fact that the idea of writing books that you had that haven't been published, because so many authors, I remember back in the old day when like Twitter was actually a cool thing, authors were writing down their novels and they were putting in the titles of the novels that never got published and like
Yeah.
tossing them out. And just because we've actually written a novel doesn't necessarily mean it's going to sell.
Oh my God. Yeah, exactly. And I tried for so many years to write a mystery series that was about a high school basketball coach who solves crimes. And weirdly, nobody wanted to buy it, but I kept at it. And no, it's still not published today. And I'm glad now, in retrospect, because I know nothing about basketball or coaching. I know a little bit about crime, but only basically from watching Law and Order. So it's probably the best.
Yeah, sometimes in retrospect, going back and looking at those books, it's like, yeah, no, I've got one as well, and I'm like, I'm okay with that one not getting published.
Yeah.
It,
Exactly. You learn as you go along and your writing gets better, hopefully.
mhm.
So I think it's always best when I talk to writers who say, "Yeah, I've written, every book they've written has been published." I'm like, "Really?" Because that's not my experience, and that's okay. They're both okay, but I don't know. They're lucky ducks, I guess.
Yeah, it's the nature of the beast, I feel like, and I think it's something that a lot of new authors coming into it have to understand
Yeah,
that not everything is going to be sold. That's okay.
exactly. And sometimes it's for the best.
Mhm. Yes, that is true. And over the years, because we've been doing this podcast for about 8 years now,
Oh
and
wow.
we've kept a running tally of how
Yeah.
many books, like who has the most books that we've talked to that have been published. And our last one was Vanessa Riley when we talked to her a couple months ago. She was at 23. So now you are currently the queen with over 50.
Thank you. Yeah, I like being queen. It's good. I'll take it.
Now, what is it about that keeps you going where you can write so many books and keep the career going and alive and hopefully still enjoyable?
Yeah. Yeah. I always think of ideas for books as I actually heard another author references, and I can't remember what his name was, but I know it was a man. He said that ideas for books are like sharks that bite you on the leg and will not let go until you write them down and get the whole thing out of your system. And I've always thought that is such a great analogy because that's what it feels like to me. Like when I get an idea for a book, I have to write it down. And sometimes it doesn't work out. I have so many books I've started and not finished, but just to get that out of my system and have the shark let go. So I don't know why that I'm that kind of person that constantly is getting ideas for books that I really want to write down, but I do. And hopefully it will not end anytime soon because it's my favorite thing to do.
Mhm. I think that's a fantastic answer. And I think that's maybe one of the things that maybe keeps writers going is that you love it. It's the thing you
Yeah.
do. It's you
Yeah.
sleep and breathe books.
Yeah. I mean, you hate it too. So
Mhm.
don't get me wrong. Like you love it, but there's also a great deal of hate and frustration and feeling like you're going nowhere and the story's not working. But I kind of love that challenge too. So Yeah, I think it's like anything that you do that you love doing. My husband is a chef, so he likes to cook. And sometimes things don't work out, but when they do, it's great.
Mhm. And
I think
it's
it's,
always
oh,
important.
sorry.
Go ahead, Michelle. Go ahead.
The spirit has moved me. Excuse me. I was just thinking it's also such really great advice for authors who are just starting out or who, have this idea or they don't know what they want to do with it, just to write it down. You don't even have to, that doesn't mean that once the idea is written down, you immediately have to write the book. At least, you have it written down. I have a piece of paper folded in my desk that I wrote an idea on like 2 years ago that I haven't revisited yet. But at least you have it on paper so you can always
Yeah.
go back to it.
Yeah. If you're like me, you will not remember it in a few weeks unless you write it down. And then, okay, it's kind of, for some reason, it feels a little bit started.
And it's always nice to have that little list or that file in your computer where you're like, oh, I remember this book. I remember the story when you're looking at the next thing you want to write.
Yeah, I use notes on my phone. It's like now I actually feel very technologically savvy because I've stopped writing things on little tiny pieces of paper and losing them. Now it's like, unless I lose my phone, I should be okay.
I have it in my computer, so I have like a whole like Excel spreadsheet.
Wow, that
I
is
know.
sophisticated. Good job.
I try because
Oh,
sometimes you just,
Fancy.
isn't
yeah,
it?
very fancy. I knew an author who used to keep an Excel spreadsheet on how many pages she wrote a day. Like, and she had to have it was a very, I think it was like 20 pages a day. It was a lot. And I saw it accidentally. I think we were writing in a cafe. I was just like, you've surpassed, you've surpassed anyone I know to have such a great, I don't know if it's great, actually, now thinking back. It was a little, it would intimidate me. I'm like, oh my God. I don't know. Just writing a book is enough. I don't know if you have to keep a spreadsheet on how many pages you've done a day.
Yeah, exactly. It's yeah, for me, it's like, okay, I feel really good and accomplished if I can get out 1,000 or more words in a day. But
Yeah.
sometimes it's 500 words. Yesterday it was
Yeah.
like 300. It's progress.
I had a great writing teacher. I went to Indiana University and I had a great teacher called, his name is Tony Artizzoni. And he used to tell us, you know what, just write any amount, just write a grocery list. Like, it doesn't matter. As long as you write a little bit every day, don't be so hard on yourself and try to make it the best grocery list you can, the most readable of any grocery list. And that took a lot of pressure off. I felt like, okay, because I thought writers wrote so many pages per day, and some of them do. But a grocery list, I think anyone can handle.
Mhm. I think so. We can definitely handle that. And then you've also, before we get into the book itself, you've written young adult books and adult novels as well. And is there a difference between writing the two novels, do you find, or are they more similar than one might think?
They're very different. And I always get mad when I see, kind of, I'm not knocking any particular celebrity, but like when celebrities will write a children's book and they're like, it was so easy, it was only 20 pages. Some of those stories are actually the hardest to write because they are so short. And you're also writing to an audience that has a very short attention span. So you really got to make it great. I find writing for kids a little bit harder than writing for adults because at least with adults, you have a much longer amount of pages. So you have more time to tell the story and you don't have to be quite, I mean, you should be concise, but you don't have to be quite as concise as you do with the children's book. So I think the average YA novel is like 50,000 words back in the old days. Now they're getting longer and longer. Whereas an adult book is at least usually about 80,000 words. So that's a huge difference. I mean, that's basically almost a book in difference of length wise. So, and also, of course, you have a lot of subject matter that you can't, I mean, you could, but I tend to avoid a lot of swearing in my children's books just because people get so mad. They get mad when I swear in my adult books too. That's just very strange to me. So yeah, they're very different.
Well, sorry, I was seeing Addie pop in.
I know I'm in a different seat than I usually am, so she's in a unique opportunity to join the conversation tonight.
Oh, we're all being plagued with animal problems because my cat came in a little while ago and then demanded to be let out very loudly. So I was worried you guys were going to hear meowing the whole time.
And for once, my dogs aren't over here, expecting to be on my lap while I do this.
Oh, that would be great though. I would enjoy seeing that.
Yeah. She's just over here curled up, like, why are you doing this?
Oh,
and
okay.
eating me right now moment.
Yeah.
So let's go ahead and move on to talking about the book, You're Enchanted to Meet You. The novel that we're here to technically talk about today, even though I picked your brain about publishing and writing and whatnot. So for those who are not familiar with Enchanted to Meet You, could you give us a brief synopsis about it?
Sure. Yeah. Enchanted to Meet You is a contemporary paranormal romance, I would call it, about a plus size witch who is just at her normal day job when a really handsome stranger walks in and tells her that she is the chosen one and she has to save her small town from being annihilated by demonic forces, which is always something I wish would happen at my day job, but it never did. So I'm like, I'm going to write a book where that does happen to somebody and live through it vicariously.
I feel like writing, that's what we do, is we just live through our characters vicariously.
Exactly.
Like, everything.
Yeah, that's why I don't like torturing my characters too much, because I'm like, I don't want that to happen to me. And my editor's always like, you need more emotion, have some more drama. I'm like, oh, I don't want to put them through that. But yeah, that's what makes a book. So you have to.
Yeah, it was funny. My husband and I were talking with a friend last weekend, and he was talking about one of my books, and he was like, I thought you'd do it differently. And he was talking about this one scene, because I'm not going to give away any spoilers either. And he was like, he was talking about how differently it could go. But then there's like murder. And my husband was like, oh yeah, no, that's not her MO. That's just not her MO. She's going to kill him off. She has no.
Oh, that's funny.
It's like, oh, my husband hits me.
Oh, much of what authors do is sit there and go, what would happen if?
Right.
And that's just the question that we're constantly trying to answer in new and different ways.
Yeah, exactly. Have a kind of maybe a plot that has been done before, like the chosen one plot is a trope and it's been well trodden, but you put your own twist on it, and then that makes it fun hopefully for the readers, but definitely fun for you as the author.
I mean, it is fun. I'm about halfway through in the novel, so it is fun. I am enjoying it, and it's a different, definitely a different twist on that whole chosen one trope.
Thanks. Yeah, kind of updated it a little bit. Yeah.
Now let's talk about Jessica's character, because so far she is my favorite character in the whole novel.
That's good, because she's the main character, so that's good.
It is good, yeah. So what was it like for you to create her and in relation to the town, and also to Derek, right? Yes?
Derek, yeah.
Yeah.
I think when you're writing, what you want to do is, create characters who, putting them in that situation that you're putting them in, at least for me, I always come up with the plot first, and then I move on to what kind of character would be the most interesting in that kind of scenario. So Jessica has a lot of issues with the whole witchcraft thing, because in my world, there's a lot of people who believe you can only be a witch if you've inherited that ability from an ancestor. And that's not the case with Jessica. She just thinks magic should be for everyone because it's everywhere. And so she's kind of dealing with an organization that exists in the world of the book that has outlawed people who perform magic unless they actually are descended from somebody who does magic. And I thought it would be really fun to put somebody like that in this chosen one plot, because that makes it even more unlikely that she'd ever thought that this would happen to her. And then put in a guy who's of course extremely good looking, but also very sarcastic and has, his own issues. In this case, they might be some parental issues that he's dealing with. I'm not going to give anything away since you haven't finished it yet, but I thought that would be fun. And so I think that's kind of what you do, is you come up with a plot, I feel like, and then you try to put in characters who would probably least like being in that plot. Like, for instance, in the Princess Diaries, that's why I made the Princess Diaries about a character who doesn't want to be a princess, because everyone I know wants to be a princess. I want to be a princess. Everyone wants to be a princess, but not Mia Thermopolis, because she's shy and insecure, and also, just wants to finish high school. So that's, to me, one of the most interesting kind of stories to read.
Yeah, and I found it was very for me, it was very interesting having the outsider perspective going into this whole other world of things, and that anybody could really do it when it comes down to it. In that world where, like, yeah, you want to be a witch, go ahead and be a witch. You don't have
Yeah.
to be born.
Yeah, just practice. You have to practice, just like anything.
Which, I mean, it says so much about like real life. It's like one of those real life lessons where it's like you don't have to be born into this thing. You can go ahead and work your way into it.
Yeah, exactly. Just if you've got the kind of stubbornness to do it, then, you know, why quit? I mean, I kind of feel like when I was trying to get published, I spent so many years getting rejected and I wanted to quit, but then at the same time, I love what I was doing so much that I was like, well, it doesn't really matter because I'm going to keep writing anyway. So that's why I didn't quit after I'd been rejected for, you know, however many years straight. Although I'm still upset about some of the books that I wrote that didn't get published, but that's okay. One day, maybe I'll self-publish. I don't know. We'll see.
I'm circling all the way back to the conversation that we had earlier about the books that we've written that haven't been published yet.
Right, yeah.
It doesn't mean that they're dead.
No, I mean, they're always alive in your heart. And you always just have this feeling like, one day the world will be ready for that book that nobody wanted at the time. It's gonna happen.
Are there ever characters that you've pulled from a story that wasn't able to sell that you've said, oh, they might fit in this world or they might work in this storyline? And
100%. Yeah. No. I mean, and whole scenes too. Like, okay, well, that actually didn't work out for that book, but I'm going to plop it into this book. And nobody obviously can tell the difference because very few people have actually read the books that they came from. But yeah, I do that all the time. You know, and you love, like, there'll be characters that I'm sure that you've written that you love, but the story that they were in didn't work out. So you just move them to something else and hopefully that will work. Just see how it goes. You can trick your editor into maybe not recognizing that character.
Yeah.
What are you talking about? He's brand new.
I know. Wait.
So many books on a daily basis. They won't notice a thing.
That's what I always feel like. But I don't do that a lot, but I have done it. And then sometimes I still go back to those old books. I'm like, did I use that? Yeah. Oh, need to have that scene. That's a good one.
Now, I find that there's always an allure to writing witchy books or to reading witchy books. I'm assuming, and there is an allure, I would say, also to being able to write them. Because from what I can tell, again, not like super stalking-ish or anything, looking through your catalog, this is the first one involving witches that you've actually written.
It's the first one for adults. Yeah,
Okay.
I did YA witches, teen witches, which are always fun. But no, this is my first one for adults. So yeah, it was really fun. Doing the research was insane. And because it was weird, while I was writing the book, there was a lot of movement in the United States, especially amongst people who have ancestors who were killed or executed for witchcraft back in the 1600s. Just coincidentally, while I was writing this book, all of that was going on. They're trying to get their ancestors' names exonerated because, you know, and then there would be these, I guess, positions of power holders, all men in the government who would be like, well, we can't exonerate them because what if they, you know, they were doing witchcraft and they're witches, so they can't. And I'm like, oh my God, okay. That's great though. But no, I'm not gonna tell you what happens, but at least in the state that I was writing about, the ancestors successfully got their witch ancestresses exonerated, despite that guy who was like, but what if they were worshiping Satan? Oh my God, it was so horrible.
It's horrible. I was watching, there was a TikTok shop where she was doing tarot readings. She was in a cult shop and she was doing tarot readings, and they wrote something about how great she was doing, all these great things she was doing for the community. And then all of a sudden, out of nowhere, the chief of police comes in and he's like, by the way, tarot is illegal in the state of Pennsylvania.
No,
yeah.
No,
and then
wait, tarot is illegal?
Yeah, it's like, yeah, telling fortunes was illegal.
Oh my God. Yeah.
And she has stuff put up all over her shop and everything to warn about it, but then she starts getting harassed by the police over this. and
Okay.
she was just doing positive things in the community.
Well, yeah, it's because he was threatened.
Hmm.
Yes, he was probably, I don't know. I was really surprised when I was doing my research that I found out that there are there are countries now where it is still illegal to practice witchcraft, and the penalty is death. Like in Saudi Arabia a couple of years ago, they executed 2 women for alleged sorcery, and so that was this is messed up.
Yeah, and I'm glad you brought up the research side of it, because even though, it's a contemporary novel, and there's even with your other novels as well, I always like to bring up the fact that historical fiction does not get to just be the only one that does research. That there is
Oh
a
my
certain
God.
there's a certain amount of research that has to be done regardless of the genre. And
Yeah.
so I'm assuming you did a lot of, how much research did you do into witchcraft itself and
Well, I
other
was just
aspects?
cleaning out. Yeah, I was just cleaning out my bookmarks for that book because I was like, well, I'm done with that book. Now I got to clean. There were hundreds. I mean, there were just so many things. And aside from that, I always find that one of the most, I guess, things that's, I guess, triggering for readers is when you're writing about a place that's real and you get something wrong. So for instance, this book is set in Connecticut, which is not a place that I live, but I've been there many times and I have friends who live there. But I really researched as much as I could, and I did make the town fake because I was like, I do not, because I always hear from readers if there's just something wrong when you're writing about a real place. I think I said a book in Alaska once, which I have never been to Alaska, and I got so much stuff wrong, and people were really mad and they should be, because it's their home and you got it wrong, so you have to take responsibility for that. But now I'm constantly online Google mapping and checking the weather and what grocery store would they go to, just because if you're writing a contemporary book, you really, and you're, especially if you're not writing about your hometown, you really have to do the research.
And Google Maps is an absolutely wonderful thing when it comes to researching a place.
Yeah, I didn't have it when I was first starting out because there was no internet. That's how old I am. So I always tell people, look, the Alaska thing, I went to the library and I got a book on Alaska, but clearly it was not a good enough book because I thought there were mountains in this particular area and there are not. That's my bad.
Yeah, I don't think I could have written my Antoinette Sister, my second novel, during the pandemic when my trip to Italy got canceled without without Google Maps, without having the internet. I would not have been able to write that book because of
there's so much stuff that's not on the internet though about places, like how it smells and how the food tastes. So I always recommend that people either make up the place they're writing about completely, or that they only write about places that they've been to, so they can talk about the way the light slants at sunset, and because those things are important details in books, just for the atmosphere and making them believable, especially when you're writing about witches. Not that witches aren't real, but in this particular book, the magic might be a little bit enhanced.
Well, yeah, there are elements of like the witchcraft that was like true when it came to the stories and the lore and whatnot. And then also it was I'm surprised you had the different types of witches, like when it came to it, where there was the hedge witch and the garden witch, and there was it a weather witch,
cottage witch,
cottage witch,
yes. Kitchen witch. Yeah, that's so fun, because I think if you're practicing magic, you probably do have particular things you gravitate towards. Some people it might be ingredients in the kitchen, or some people it might be plants that you find outside. So I thought that was important for a little bit of making it a little more realistic. I don't know about the weather witch, although she does draw power from the weather, but then she seems to be able to create storms, which I don't know. I've never met anyone who could do that.
Yeah, that would be cool, and it would probably be very dangerous, because I know I would cause a whole lot of problems.
Right, if you lost your temper, there would be a massive storm.
Exactly. I mean, I could just imagine some of the fights I've had with my husband and the massive storms I would create, or just out of like frustration,
without meaning to. Without meaning to.
Yeah, I think there was the one scene where it was because it was the antagonist to Jessica, and I'm gonna get her name wrong, but it's Raquel, or is it Rachel?
Oh my God, how could I have forgotten?
I have this
Well,
book.
let's just say that's one of the things I love about small town romances is that, you know, your high school nemesis is still living in the town. And so
Yes.
you run into that person going to the grocery store or whatever, and you cannot escape, which is if you moved, you would definitely not have to deal with that. But yeah, that character, you know,
Rosalie,
I'm
was it
actually working
Rosalie?
on the sequel now. Yes, Rosalie.
Rosalie, okay.
Working on the sequel, so I don't have all that stuff right in the top of my mind because it's
Yeah.
moved on to new characters. So
Oh yeah, you know, that's one of the frustrating things that people like we don't always others don't take into consideration. I didn't take into consideration when I was interviewing authors before I started my books got published because you're in the headspace of your new book and then you're
right,
having to
yeah,
also go ahead and talk about these novels, and I was out there having to go to book clubs and be like, okay, and on this date, I forgot the name, and then like I
yeah.
missed the pronunciation and of a name, and then somebody was like, oh no, it's pronounced a different way, and it's like, yeah, yeah, I get that. I just my head was in all of these other French names at the time that I was there
Hilarious.
at the book club. So it there's a lot that goes on in an author's head.
Right, because while you are promoting the book that you finished, you're writing your next book. So sometimes it's tough. A good writer would review the book before they go on a podcast to talk about it. But oh well, it's been like a year since I handed this in. I don't remember what it's about. No, I do. I forgot Rosalie though. She's a very important character. She's the high school nemesis of Jessica, and yeah, that's
She's a fantastic nemesis.
thank you. Yeah, well, you know, she's got it all going on, and in addition to which, she has magical powers. So it's tough. It's tough when that's your high school nemesis.
Yes, and I'm already like she's annoying me, but in a very good way, where it's like she's deliciously evil.
Yes, she
And I
is.
am enjoying that.
And we all know people like that, unfortunately, like where you just, oh my God, really? That is your MO, and you've got to just say nasty things to people. But yeah, there are people like that.
Yeah, and then cause a hailstorm that
Yeah, but that aside, yeah.
yeah, I mean that would be
That's a
I
little
would be a lot
nastier.
like Rosalie if I given those powers, I feel like.
I've just have really been enjoying the conversation. I'm so mad that I'm not 100% tonight because I was really looking forward to asking all the questions, and now my brain is like, no, we're not thinking tonight.
It's okay. I respect you for even showing up when you're so under the weather.
Yes, well, we are at our half hour, so I don't want to keep you any longer. So thank you so much for joining us. For those of you listening, feel free to pick up your copy of Enchanted to Meet You. We will have a link in our show notes. As always, bookshop.org supports all the wonderful authors who take their time out to come and visit us. It supports this podcast, but most importantly, it supports your independent bookstore. So please be sure to get your copy of Enchanted to Meet You after listening to this episode. And thank you, Meg, so much for joining us. It was such a
Thank
pleasure.
you so much.
Thank you so much for having me, and I hope you feel better soon.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Okay.
All right.
Bye.
Bye.